The father fled the fire and left his daughter in a wheelchair, but the dog did the unthinkable. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from. It's always awesome to see how far our stories are reaching. In a weathered wooden house surrounded by dry weeds lived Emma Carter, an 11-year-old girl who had never walked. Her legs, thin as autumn twigs, hadn't worked since birth. Her wheelchair was her only way to move, but it also felt like a silent prison. Her large blue eyes stared out the window toward the forest, where a creepy fog hid the first flames in the distance. Inside the house, it was almost completely quiet, broken only by the hum of an old radio playing country music. There were no laughs, no footsteps, no kind voices, just the sound of a clock ticking, each second like a thud in a locked room. Emma lived with her father, James Carter, a retired soldier with a face marked by years of anger, silence, and disappointment. Since his wife died in tragic circumstances during Emma's birth, he had become a shadow in his own home. He barely spoke to his daughter beyond what was necessary. He didn't yell, but he didn't offer comfort either. He treated her like a fragile piece of furniture he preferred to keep at a distance. That morning, James was getting ready to leave. He carried a heavy backpack and kept his eyes down. Emma watched him from her wheelchair in the dining room, her hands folded in her lap. She didn't ask where he was going. She knew he wouldn't answer. "I'll be back before lunch," he muttered, without looking at her. Emma didn't reply. She just looked down. The door closed with a dull thud. Then a single tear slid silently down her cheek. Hours passed. Emma kept herself busy as best she could, flipping through a storybook she knew by heart, tracing the windowpane with her fingertips, listening to the creak of branches outside. Loneliness had been her only companion for years. Just before sunset, she heard the rumble of her father's old pickup truck. She sat up in her chair, curious. James didn't usually come back so early. Peering out the window, she saw him step out with something odd in his arms, a large dusty dog with a tired but noble look. It looked like a German shepherd, though time had dulled its coat. Emma held her breath. It had been so long since she'd seen an animal up close. When James came inside, he set the dog on the floor without a word. The animal stood still, watching quietly. "Found it on the road. It's old, but it might keep foxes away," James said, then walked to the kitchen. Emma maneuvered her wheelchair down the ramp with effort and approached the dog. It watched her with an unusual interest, not fear, not aggression, not indifference, just pure, calm attention. "What's your name?" Emma asked, almost in a whisper. The dog tilted its head as if it understood. Emma smiled for the first time in weeks. "Then I'll call you Buddy." The dog took a small step forward and gently rested its head in her lap. Emma trembled, not from fear, but because this was the first time in ages that anyone, even a dog, had shown her something like affection. James watched from the kitchen. His face was blank, but there was a flicker in his eyes, a hint of unease he couldn't explain. That night, Emma shared her dinner with Buddy. She offered him a piece of bread, which he took gently. While her father drank silently in front of the TV, she stroked the dog's back, like someone touching a piece of the sky. Before bed, Emma looked into Buddy's eyes and said, "I don't know why you came, but thank you for not passing by." Buddy blinked slowly. Then he rested his head by her bed, as if he knew his place was right there from that moment on. The days that followed brought a subtle but deep change to Emma's routine. Where there was once only silence, now there were soft footsteps, long breaths, and the occasional quiet bark. Buddy never left her side. He slept at the foot of her bed, followed her when she moved in her wheelchair, and sat by the door when James came home, like a watchful shadow. One morning, Emma woke to Buddy's wet nose brushing her hand. The sky was covered in dark clouds, and the wind carried the smell of ash. From the radio, a deep voice announced that the forest fires had grown worse and that authorities were considering evacuating some rural areas. Emma turned her head toward the window. In the distance, a line of smoke curled upward from the trees. It wasn't an immediate threat yet, but the sky had that orange tint that didn't lie. "Do you think it'll reach us?" she asked Buddy. The dog perked up his ears, alert. Then he wagged his tail slowly and licked her wrist. Later in the dining room, James listened to the same news on the radio, but showed no sign of worry. He sipped his black coffee in silence. His eyes, red from sleepless nights and whiskey, stared into nothing. "Should we get ready to leave?" Emma asked softly. James didn't even look up. "It won't get here." "But the radio. I've lived in this damn area for 20 years. They always say the same thing." he cut her off, his voice sharp. Buddy tensed at the tone and moved closer to Emma, placing himself between her and her father. James glanced at the dog with a sneer. "Stupid dog. Just another nuisance," he muttered. That night, as Emma brushed Buddy's fur with an old brush she'd found in a closet, she whispered something she'd been holding inside for a long time. I think it's my fault Mom died." Buddy lifted his head, stopping her with his deep gaze. "Dad never says it, but I feel it. Since I was born, he stopped wanting to live. Sometimes I think it would have been better if I hadn't been born." Buddy let out a soft whimper and rested his head on her still legs. The touch was warm, steady, like a silent promise. Emma closed her eyes. "With you, it's different. You don't need to say anything, you just are." The fires kept spreading. 3 days later, a fire truck drove down the main road, its loudspeaker urging neighbors to prepare to evacuate. Emma watched the truck from the window, her eyes sharp. But James didn't budge. Instead of packing, he went to the basement. There, hidden under an old tarp, he kept documents, stacks of cash, and a fake passport. He had plans, but they didn't include his daughter. That afternoon, Buddy started acting differently. He paced the house restlessly, sniffing at doors, whining softly. He'd stop by the window, staring at the forest. Emma noticed his anxiety and began to sense something was wrong. Meanwhile, James locked himself in the backyard shed. A strong smell of gasoline filled the air. He was hiding something, but Emma couldn't see from her spot. She only heard the creak of wood, quick footsteps, and the metallic clank of gas cans being dragged. Buddy stood frozen in front of the shed door. He growled low, his eyes fixed, as if he saw something Emma couldn't. When James came out, his face was different, colder, more determined. "Tomorrow's a good day to leave," he said, looking at no one. Emma didn't understand, but Buddy did. That night, he didn't sleep. He guarded the door to Emma's room, eyes wide open, like a soldier on his final watch. Dawn arrived painted red. The sky, covered in thick haze, seemed to struggle to breathe. Ashes fell like sad snow onto the porch. Emma woke with a dry throat. The smell of smoke was stronger, closer. From her window, the treetops were no longer green, but shadows wrapped in an orange glow. Something was burning, and it wasn't far. Buddy wasn't in his usual spot by her bed. Emma sat up in her wheelchair and looked for him. She found him by the hallway door, tense, his nose pressed to the floor, as if sensing something invisible. Then she heard hurried footsteps. James appeared, backpack slung over his shoulder, keys in hand. He carried nothing else, no blankets, no food, no clothes for his daughter. Just documents, just what mattered to him. "Dad, are we evacuating?" Emma asked, her fear plain. James didn't answer. He yanked the curtains shut and mumbled to himself. No time left. Then he approached Emma and for the first time in days, looked her in the eyes. But there was no warmth, no compassion, just haste. "I have to do something. Stay in your room. Don't come out, got it?" "But what about Buddy?" "He's just a dog," James shouted, slamming the door as he left. Emma's stomach twisted. It wasn't the fire that scared her. It was the certainty that something was terribly wrong. Smoke began seeping under the door. Buddy raced back from the hallway, frantic, scratching at the wood as if trying to warn her. Emma tried to move, but her wheelchair got stuck in the carpet. Suddenly, she heard a metallic click, a lock. James had bolted the door from the outside. Emma was trapped. "Dad! Dad, please!" she screamed, pounding the wood with her fists. No one answered, only silence, broken by the distant crackle of fire, now sounding like it was coming from the backyard. Buddy barked wildly. Then he threw himself against the door again and again. His paws slipped, but he didn't stop. The smoke grew thicker. Emma started coughing. "Buddy, you can't," she said through tears. But the dog didn't give up. He backed up, took a running start and slammed into the door with all his weight. Once, twice, 3 times. On the 4th, the lock snapped with a sharp crack. The door swung open and a cloud of smoke engulfed them. Buddy turned to Emma, tongue out, chest heaving. He didn't need words. His message was clear, they had to get out. Now. Emma took a shaky breath and gripped the arms of her wheelchair. Buddy positioned himself behind her and pushed with his nose, then his paws, forcing every movement. The wheels squeaked against the hot wooden floor. The hallway was a tunnel of smoke. Flames licked the dining room walls. The kitchen was ablaze. Parts of the ceiling creaked, ready to collapse. "Buddy?" Emma whispered, her voice nearly gone. The dog pushed harder. When they reached the stairs, Emma thought it was over, but Buddy moved to her side and nudged the wheelchair, guiding it down slowly, step by step. Each jolt was a risk. One mistake, and they'd both fall. The final stretch was a slide. Buddy grabbed the blanket on the back of the chair with his teeth, dragging it to the front door, which was starting to warp from the heat. Emma wasn't crying. She just breathed as best she could. She didn't understand how this old, tired dog could act with such determination, but he did. As if his whole life had been training for this moment. Buddy lunged at the door with renewed strength. The latch broke. A hot, glowing air hit them from outside. The sky was red. The house burned behind them. The fence was collapsing, and flames devoured the trees in the yard. But they were out. Buddy took a step and stopped. He was breathing hard. His fur smoked in patches. Emma, still in her chair, stroked his back with a trembling hand. "You did it," she murmured. "Buddy, you did it." The dog didn't wag his tail. He just looked at her, his deep eyes saying everything without a sound. The heat outside was suffocating. The air pressed down like a burning blanket. Emma, her face smudged with soot and lips cracked, tried to focus her eyes. The fire's glow and smoke blurred her vision, but she could make out the shapes of burning trees and the warped outline of the collapsing fence. Everything moved in slow motion. Buddy panted heavily. His left side was singed and one back leg limped. Still, he stood tall, alert, as if his job wasn't done. Emma tried to turn her wheelchair, but the ground was rough, covered in ash and charred branches. The wheels got stuck in the dry dirt. Buddy noticed. Without hesitation, he positioned himself behind her and pushed, growling with effort. His muscles shook, but he kept going. Ahead, a narrow path between two rows of trees formed a natural corridor. Flames lined both sides, creating an unstable passage lit by the blaze. It wasn't safe, but it was their only way out. "Are you going to keep going?" Emma whispered, barely audible. Buddy answered with a sharp bark, as if saying there was no other choice. They moved forward. Every yard was a fight. Embers floated in the air, stinging their skin like needles. Smoke filled their lungs, burning inside. Emma coughed, covering her mouth with her sleeve. Buddy didn't stop. He pressed on like a wounded soldier, driven by instinct and love. Suddenly, a tree crashed down just yards ahead, kicking up a cloud of dust and sparks. Emma screamed, but Buddy veered right and found another path, narrower, almost hidden. He followed it without pause. Then they heard something, the distant roar of an engine, a steady sound different from the fire's crackle. A vehicle. Buddy picked up his pace. He barked with all his strength, his throat raw. He barked like he knew this was their last chance. Through the smoke, a shape appeared. A red fire truck, lights flashing, hose unrolled, firefighters. 3 men in helmets and fireproof jackets ran toward the flames. One stopped when he heard the barks. "Did you hear that? Someone's out there." "Don't go deeper, it's too dangerous," another shouted. "But someone's trapped." Buddy ran forward. He broke through a curtain of smoke and stood in front of the truck. His legs shook, his breathing was ragged, but he kept barking. The firefighters exchanged glances. "Follow the dog, move!" Emma saw their shapes approaching, blurry at first, then clearer. One man knelt beside her, slipping an oxygen mask over her face while another carefully lifted her chair. "It's okay, kid. You're safe now." Emma tried to speak but could only whisper, He saved me." She pointed to Buddy, who collapsed a few yards away, exhausted, his chest heaving, eyes fixed on her. "The dog's hurt," one firefighter yelled. "Quick, get him!" Within minutes they were out. Emma was carried on a stretcher, Buddy wrapped in a damp blanket. Both covered in soot were surrounded by the sound of sirens and urgent voices. The truck pulled away as, behind them, the house collapsed in a burst of fire and sparks. Nothing was left. No walls, no roof, just ashes. From the stretcher, Emma caught a glimpse of Buddy through the truck's back window, lying down but with his eyes still open. "Don't leave me, Buddy, please," she whispered, her voice faint. He didn't move his head, but his eyes, shining through tears, said he'd stay. Until the end. The hospital's lights flickered softly in the main hallway. It was a small rural medical center with cream-colored walls and the smell of disinfectant. Night had fallen, and a respectful quiet filled the place, broken occasionally by the distant beep of a heart monitor. Emma lay on a stretcher in the emergency room, hooked to an oxygen mask. Her face was streaked with soot, her eyelashes dusted with ash. She slept deeply, sedated after being stabilized. In her right hand, she clutched a piece of the blanket they'd wrapped around Buddy, as if letting go would mean losing him forever. A few yards away, in a makeshift veterinary room, Buddy was being treated by a rescue team volunteer who was also an animal care technician. The dog lay still, breathing slowly. He had burns on his paws, severe dehydration, and a cracked rib. His once thick fur was scorched in spots. "He's alive by a miracle," the technician muttered, applying a special ointment to the wounds. "I don't know how he held on so long. He's a real fighter." Fire Chief Tom Harrison, a sturdy man with weathered skin and white hair, watched from the doorway, arms crossed. He'd been in more rescues than he could count, but something about this one hit differently. That dog, that four-legged kid, had done the impossible to save a girl. "Any word on the father?" he asked the paramedic. "Nothing. Reported missing. Some say they saw him heading north before the fire. He wasn't with the girl when we found her, no trace of him." Tom frowned. "That doesn't sit right with me." Hours later, Emma woke. She pulled off the oxygen mask with shaky hands, searching for Buddy. She didn't ask about her house. She didn't ask for her dad. She just wanted to know if her hero was still alive. "Where is he?" she murmured, voice breaking. The nurse, a young woman named Emily, knelt by the bed and gently stroked Emma's hair. "He's here, sweetie. They're taking care of him. He's really tired, but he's alive." Emma closed her eyes, tears streaming silently. Emily stayed by her side, holding her hand, knowing no words could comfort her better than that truth. Later, in a quieter room, Emma asked to see Buddy. Chief Harrison made an exception. They brought the dog in on a makeshift stretcher next to her bed. When they set him down, Buddy opened his eyes. Slow, heavy, but full of the same light. "Hey, Buddy," Emma whispered, touching his head gently. "Don't go, okay?" Buddy didn't wag his tail. He just closed his eyes and exhaled, as if finding peace in her voice. Emma stayed quiet, petting him. The heart monitor beeped a slow but steady rhythm. It was hope. Chief Harrison stood at the door, watching. Then he turned to Emily. "I'm calling social services, but I made sure the girl and the dog stay together. They don't deserve to be split up." That night, an investigation into the fire began. Security footage from a nearby gas station showed James Carter loading fuel into several cans hours before the blaze. They also found his truck abandoned near a state border. Fake cash and forged documents confirmed he'd tried to flee. An arrest warrant was issued. Emma didn't know any of this then. For her, the world was just the warm feel of Buddy's body, the hum of hospital machines, and one truth beating in her chest. When everyone else left her behind, he chose to stay. The following days were a mix of silence, healing, and painful discoveries. Emma spent her time beside Buddy, whose body was recovering slowly, though doctors warned a full recovery would take time, if it happened at all. Still, whenever she spoke to him, he opened his eyes. He didn't wag his tail or get up, but his gaze was enough to make Emma feel she still had a piece of home. At the hospital, the rescue story spread like wildfire. Nurses, doctors, and even patients talked about the hero dog who'd crossed a blaze to save a girl in a wheelchair. Some called it a miracle, others fate. Everyone, without fail, paused with respect when passing Emma's room. One morning, Emily brought in a breakfast tray. She wore a faint smile, but her face held a gentle warmth like she was about to share a delicate truth. "Emma," she said, setting the tray on a rolling table, "someone wants to see you." Emma looked up, curious. Visitors weren't common. Emily stepped aside and a woman with light brown hair, pale skin, and a slight northern accent walked in. She carried a folder and wore a lavender scarf. "Hi, Emma. I'm Sarah Miller. I work with the county's Child Services Department. Can I sit down?" Emma nodded while Buddy, from his makeshift bed, lifted one ear slightly. Sarah sat by the bed and looked at Emma with a warmth she wasn't used to from adults. "I won't ask tough questions. I just want to know how you're doing. Do you feel safe here?" Emma thought for a moment before answering. "Yes. As long as Buddy's with me, yes." Sarah smiled. "I'm glad you say that. Look, we're looking into everything about the fire. We know your dad wasn't with you. We also know he tried to run and left a lot unexplained. I don't want you to think about that now, but we're finding a place where you can feel calm, without fear." Emma looked down, her voice barely a whisper. "I don't want to go without Buddy." "You won't have to," Sarah said without hesitation. "He goes with you wherever you go." A tear rolled down Emma's cheek, silent. Sarah handed her a tissue without another word. That afternoon, Emma was moved to a more comfortable room. Sarah, after talking to the hospital director, offered to be her temporary guardian while the legal case was sorted out. No one objected. The bond between them was instant, almost instinctive. Emily, in confidence, told Emma that Sarah had lost her only son 2 years ago in a car accident. Maybe that's why she felt something when she saw her. Sometimes, Emily said while packing some things, the holes in our hearts can only be filled with unexpected love. Emma and Buddy were taken by ambulance to Sarah's house. It was a simple home on the edge of a small rural town in Colorado, with a garden, a fireplace, and a view of the mountains. Buddy was set up in a special bed by the window. Emma got her own room, filled with books, cushions, and a new lightweight wheelchair that was easier to maneuver. That night, as Sarah made hot chocolate, Emma wheeled to the big window with Buddy by her side. Outside, the moon lit up the pine-covered hills. For the first time in a long time, she wasn't afraid to sleep. "You know, Buddy," she said, petting behind his ear. "I don't know what's coming next, but I'm not cold, I'm not hungry, and I'm not alone." Buddy closed his eyes and snuggled closer, his warm body against hers. Emma leaned her head back in her chair and sighed. It was a quiet new beginning, full of promise. The weeks that followed were like a breath of fresh air after a storm. Emma settled into the calm rhythm of Sarah's house. Warm breakfasts with cinnamon bread, afternoons reading by the fireplace, and slow walks in the garden, with Buddy always at her side, still moving with some effort. Their bond grew without rush. Sarah didn't ask painful questions, just listened, and that was enough for Emma. Sometimes in the quiet, they shared long looks that said more than words. Two broken souls, recognizing each other. Buddy had found his place too. He slept on the rug in Emma's room, followed her through the house and watched every shadow that passed the window. He'd regained some strength, though his steps were slower, but his spirit, the one that carried him through the flames, stayed strong. One day, as Sarah sorted papers in the kitchen, Emma wheeled up with a question she'd been holding for days. "Do you think I could ever move again someday?" Sarah set the papers down and knelt in front of her, taking Emma's small, cold hands in hers. "I think there's no limit when you've got a brave heart, but no matter what happens, you've already done the biggest thing. You survived, and you didn't do it alone." Emma nodded, her eyes filling with soft tears. Not sadness, but something new, something like hope. Weeks later, Sarah took her to a specialist in a nearby city. The doctor, an older man with a kind face and a British accent, reviewed her x-rays, tested her reflexes, and asked detailed questions. After a long pause, he put the papers away and spoke slowly. "The spinal damage is severe, but not complete. With intense therapy, discipline, and support, there's a chance you could regain some movement in your torso and hands. I can't promise miracles, but there's a possibility." Emma didn't speak. She just looked at Buddy, lying beside the exam table. The dog lifted his head, as if he understood every word, and for the first time since the fire, he wagged his tail gently. The doctor recommended a pediatric physical therapy center. Sarah agreed without hesitation. She rearranged her life to work from home, fitted the car with a portable ramp, and enrolled Emma in a rehabilitation program. The first days were tough. Emma came home exhausted, muscles sore, spirits low. But Buddy was always at the door, waiting with steady eyes, like a guardian. He never barked. He was just there. And that was enough to keep her going. During one session, the therapist placed a ball in front of Emma and asked her to try moving it with her left hand. He didn't expect her to succeed, but after several minutes of effort, her index finger twitched, then her thumb. The ball rolled a few inches. The room went silent. Emma looked up, stunned. The therapist smiled, and Sarah cried quietly. Buddy stood and rested his nose in her lap. "You saw that, didn't you?" Emma whispered. Buddy let out a soft sound, part sigh, part joy. That night, Sarah tucked her in as usual. Emma, still excited, couldn't sleep. With the window open, she let the cool breeze touch her face. "You know, Buddy," she said softly, "maybe God didn't forget me. Maybe he was just waiting for you to show up." Buddy lifted his head from the rug and lowered it again. He slept peacefully, knowing he no longer had to protect her from fire, just be there for her rebirth. Winter came early that year. The southern mountains were blanketed in snow before November, and chimneys puffed smoke more often in the neighborhood. Sarah's house, though small, was filled with warmth and the smell of fresh-baked bread every afternoon. Emma moved through the hallways with more ease, thanks to intense exercises and quiet determination. Though her legs still didn't work, she could control her torso, turn her body strongly and, most importantly to her, hug Buddy on her own. Buddy had improved too. He walked without dragging his leg, though he no longer ran like before. He slept more, and on cold days he curled up by the fireplace rug, where Emma sometimes joined him with a blanket over her legs. One afternoon, as light snow fell outside, Sarah got a call from Chief Tom Harrison. His usually calm voice sounded different. They caught him. He's in custody in a neighboring state. He was using a fake name, but his fingerprints gave him away. He's being brought back to the state. Sarah hung up, her face tense. She approached Emma, who was working on a puzzle at the dining table. Buddy, ever watchful, lifted his head when he sensed the shift in the air. "Emma, I need to tell you something." Emma looked up silently, used to important news coming in that careful tone. "Your dad was arrested. He's being brought back to Colorado. He'll have to face the law for what he did." Emma didn't answer right away. She looked down, took a deep breath, and stroked Buddy's back without meeting anyone's eyes. "Will I see him?" "Only if you want to." "No, I saw him leave once. I don't need to see him come back." Sarah understood and didn't push. Days later, the authorities told Sarah that Emma could testify if she wanted, but it wasn't required. The trial was moving forward, and the evidence was strong. Emma, with a maturity beyond her years, only asked to write a letter. In it, with shaky but determined handwriting, she wrote, "I don't hate you. I'm just letting you go. The one who truly saved me didn't need words, and yet he spoke to me more than you ever did in my whole life." She signed her name and drew a small paw print beside it. The judge accepted the letter as part of the case files. James Carter was convicted of child neglect, attempted fraud, and endangering a minor. He'd spend years in a state prison. Emma didn't attend the trial. That morning, while the sentence was read, she was at therapy, pushing a ball with more strength than ever. That evening, Sarah turned on the kitchen radio. A local station shared the story of the dog who saved a girl from a fire. The tale had become a symbol of bravery, and many in the community wanted to know more. Emma listened quietly from the couch. Buddy slept peacefully at her feet. When the announcer, voice full of emotion, called him an angel with 4 paws, Emma smiled inside. "You were never just a dog, were you?" she whispered, petting his ear. "You were family from the start." That night, Sarah hung a black and white photo on the dining room wall. Emma in her wheelchair, hugging Buddy, surrounded by snow and laughter. Below it, a handwritten note. "True love doesn't need explanation. Just presence." Spring peeked shyly through the pines, slowly melting the snow on the rural paths of the small Colorado town. Life at Sarah's house grew brighter with each sunrise. Curtains swayed in the fresh breeze, the garden sprouted its first green buds, and birdsong replaced the winter's icy silence. Emma no longer needed help with many of her routines. Her body was stronger, her voice more confident, more alive. Buddy, though slower, remained her shadow. He walked beside her chair without a leash, lay under her desk during online classes, and waited patiently for her to finish her therapy exercises. He didn't need commands. He knew when to cheer her up and when to just be quiet. One afternoon, Sarah received a letter from the town hall. It was an invitation to a community ceremony honoring extraordinary acts of civilian courage from the past year. Emma's name was listed, but the focus was on Buddy. His feat had become a local symbol of selfless bravery. Reading the letter aloud, Emma stayed quiet. Then she looked at Buddy, dozing by the fireplace. "What if he doesn't like being around so many people?" she asked softly. "You'll be with him," Sarah replied. "You're all he's ever needed." The ceremony took place in the town square. The stage was decorated with wildflowers and state flags. Families, veterans, firefighters, teachers, and kids with handmade signs were there. "Thank you, Buddy, our furry hero, Emma's best friend." Emma arrived with Sarah, wearing a light blue coat that matched her eyes. Her wheelchair was adorned with tiny lights and a scarf she'd knitted over the winter. Buddy walked beside her, calm, with a red bandana around his neck. Chief Tom Harrison introduced them. He spoke without forced formality, his words clear and human. Sometimes a hero doesn't wear a uniform, carry a weapon, or earn medals. Sometimes they walk on 4 paws with a heart bigger than fear. This town will never forget what this dog did, or what this girl taught us. The applause was long. Emma wheeled to the microphone. Her voice was small but steady. "He didn't save me because he had to. He had no reason, no promises, no rewards, just love. And I think that's what changes the world." Buddy sat beside her. When kids ran up to pet him, he closed his eyes for a moment as if he knew it had all been worth it. At the end, the mayor gave Emma a symbolic plaque and a medal for Buddy, which she kept in a wooden box by her bed. That night, back home, Sarah served hot chocolate and played soft music on the record player. It was the same song her son used to love as a kid. Emma, looking at the starry sky, hugged Buddy tightly. "We made it, didn't we?" Tell me in the comments. On a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate this story so far? Your opinion means a lot to me. Buddy just breathed deeply and rested his head on her leg. Nothing more was needed. Summer arrived with golden light and endless afternoons. Days at Sarah's house were filled with soft laughter, books read under the garden tree, and visits from neighbors who were no longer strangers but part of a quiet web of care. Emma, now 13, had grown a lot. Her back was straighter, her hands stronger, and her eyes no longer lingered on sadness. She'd learned to manage on her own, wheel over dirt paths without help, and most importantly, trust. Buddy, his muzzle grayer and steps heavier, remained her guardian. He slept more, but his eyes still held that spark that said, "I'm here with you." When Emma sat to think, not from tiredness but to reflect, Buddy noticed first. He'd come close, rest his head by her chair, and stay there, breathing beside her. One morning, Sarah got a letter from the rehab center. Emma's latest medical report was great news. She'd exceeded all expectations. Her progress in torso, hand, and arm movement made it possible for the first time to consider using a walker for short distances. When Emma heard, she didn't speak right away. She sat thinking, as if the news placed her before a door she wasn't sure she wanted to open. "What if I can't do it?" she asked, more to herself than Sarah. "What if you can?" Sarah replied, with that mix of kindness and firmness she'd mastered. Days later, they tried at home. Emma stood with the therapist's help, gripping the aluminum walker tightly. Buddy watched from the hallway, still and attentive. Sarah held a camera, trying not to cry. Emma took a shaky step, then another, and a third. She didn't go far, but she didn't fall. "I did it!" she shouted, laughing through tears. Buddy walked over slowly, as if not wanting to disrupt something so special, and rested his nose on the walker. Emma leaned down as best she could and kissed his forehead. "You always knew, didn't you?" Buddy closed his eyes. Weeks later, the town school held a summer fair and asked Emma to share her story. On stage with Sarah and Buddy, who walked slower than ever but with unshaken dignity, she spoke to students, parents, and teachers. Her voice was clear and calm. "When everyone ran from the fire, he stayed. When my world was all darkness, he was my light. And when I thought I was alone, he showed me what real love is." Silence fell, then a warm, long applause, asking for nothing in return, just gratitude. That night, Sarah made a special dinner. Buddy ate a small piece of soft meat, and Emma poured fresh water into his hand-painted ceramic bowl. After dinner, they lay together on the couch, watching the stars through the open window. "You know what I think, Buddy?" Emma said softly, eyes half closed. "Miracles don't always fall from the sky. Sometimes they've got 4 paws and a heart bigger than the universe." Buddy lifted his head, rested it on her leg, and let out a long sigh as if saying, "I know." Months later, when Buddy passed in his final sleep, he did so at home with Emma beside him, holding his paw with both hands. There were no tears, just gratitude. Because some goodbyes aren't losses, but invisible crowns placed on those who fulfilled their mission. Buddy was buried under the garden tree where he and Emma spent their afternoons. A carved stone marked the spot. No dates, just a phrase, "Even if the world leaves you, a noble soul can find you." 3 years had passed since the fire that changed so many lives. Time, with its quiet steps, healed wounds without erasing scars. Emma, now 16, moved forward with determination and calm. Her days still included therapy, but they were also full of everyday victories. Walking a few steps without help, writing with more strength, tying her shoes alone. Simple acts for many, but huge for her. Sarah adopted her legally in the 2nd year, after the guardianship process closed. They now shared the same last name. They were officially mother and daughter, though their bond had existed long before the paperwork. Emma grew knowing she had someone who saw her not as a burden, but as a triumph of love over abandonment. Her connection with the community deepened too. Emma began giving talks at schools and events about resilience, animal care, and the power of true bonds. She spoke without needing to persuade. Her story did that on its own. At every talk, she brought Buddy's medal, hung on a navy blue ribbon. She never wore it. She just set it on the table, like offering a relic. Buddy lived on in everyone's memory. His story was turned into a children's book, illustrated by local school kids. The profits went to a dog rescue shelter named after him, Buddy's Haven, Courage Without Words. There, old, abandoned, or sick dogs received care, dignity, and a new chance, just like Buddy once had. James Carter was never seen again outside the state prison walls. His name stopped being mentioned in Emma's house, not out of hate, by choice. Emma learned over time that some ties break not from resentment, but to let real love bloom elsewhere. Under the old oak in Sarah's garden, where Buddy was buried, wild daisies grew. Emma placed a hand-painted wooden bench there, decorated with paw prints and stars. Sometimes she sat with a book. Other times she just closed her eyes and listened to the wind, because she knew. Even in the silence, Buddy was still there. And every time a gentle breeze brushed her face, it was like he was saying once more, "I'm with you." Thank you so much for sticking with this story until the end. If you enjoyed it, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel. It helps us a ton and motivates us to keep bringing new stories every week. And since you're here, take a moment to check out another one of our stories that's popping up on your screen. Big hug and see you next time. Stay well.